Okay, in this video module, what we're going to do is take a close look at functions. Now, we've used a function. We've used the function main, as a matter of fact, right here. But we really haven't talked about what a function is, how to declare functions, how to call functions, etc. And that's the idea of this lesson. Now, keep in mind one thing. Functions do get deeper than what I am going to demonstrate in this lesson. This lesson is really just an introduction to functions. Functions have the ability to take in data. In other words, they can take in arguments. And they have the ability to return data back to the caller. And these are things that we're going to be exploring a little bit later on after we get into variables. So, let's start out by just talking about what a function is. A function really is just a group of commands and statements that have a simple name that we can call on. That name is going to access this group of commands and statements. In the real world, a function can be thought of as a task. Let's drag my daughter in on this. I always use this when I describe functions to students. My daughter knows how to wash dishes. Okay, that is a task that I have taught her. Now, my daughter may be doing something like, let's say she's sitting in the living room and she's watching television. She's having a good old time, and I come in the room and I say, Heather, go wash the dishes. I have just made a call to her to go and wash the dishes. I was able to tell her to complete a task or to do a task by saying a simple word. So what she does is she remembers what she's doing currently. She's in the middle of watching TV, so she remembers that. She gets up. She goes into the kitchen, she starts the water, she puts the little plug in, she puts the soap in, the dishes in, she goes through all of these various steps to complete the task of getting the dishes washed. Once she is finished, what does she do? She returns back to what she was doing before I came in and asked her to wash the dishes. So she's now finished washing the dishes, she returns back to the living room and continues to watch TV. That's a function. And what I just did was, not only did I describe a function, I described a function call. The function call came from me telling her to go and do something. Now, at some point in time, she had to be trained how to wash the dishes. And that happened when she was younger, I guess you could say. But in the coding world, we have to do the same thing. We have to define a particular function before we can call on that function to do anything. Does that make sense, Logan?
Right. I mean, when we were using a function to do something, we at some point have to say what that is, step by step.
And that's what we do right here. As a matter of fact, you see void main, open and closing parentheses, and then the curly braces. This is defining a function. And then once the level loads, this function gets called. It gets parsed first, it's loaded into memory, and then it gets called if main exists. And in this case, of course, it does. Now, I told you guys in the last lesson, it's really a bad idea to go in and put all of your code inside your main function. Really, your main function should just call other functions and have those functions do the specific functionality you're looking for. So in this case right now, we could almost divide what we've got here up into two specific tasks. One was print information out to the console, and the other task is moving our lift around. Okay? So let's take a look at how we can divide this up into two different functions. So first of all, let's create a new function. Void, and let's just say this function is going to be called print info. Open, close, parentheses, enter, open curly brace, enter a couple of times, close curly brace. As a beginner, it's always a good idea to go ahead and completely define the function first. That means with the open and the closing curly brace. So right now, we can go ahead and execute our level, our script gets executed, and there's no problems with this. Even though there's no functionality embedded in our function, it's okay. This way, we won't make a mistake by forgetting to put that closing curly brace in there, which beginners seem to like to do all the time. Now, let's come down here. Let's grab this code, all this stuff right here. Let's cut it. Let's bring it up here, and let's paste it, like such. There we go. So now, our print info has some functionality. You'll notice that I defined this function before I did the main function. Your main function should always be the last function in your script. Okay, keep that in mind. Just for the simple fact that when this thing gets parsed into memory, it goes from top to bottom, and by the time we get down to main, all of the other functions are in memory. So always put your main function last. Now, let's go ahead and run our level and see if this stuff here prints out. I'm willing to bet you guys that it does not. So let's go ahead and jump back over here into Doom Edit. Make sure I did say this, didn't I?
Not yet.
Now I have. So let's go ahead and jump back over to Doom Edit. and F2, and let's go ahead and run our map and bring down the console. See, no errors. Bring down the console, and nothing was printed out either. Now, what I have just done, let's go ahead and jump back down here, is it's kind of like I've taught my daughter how to wash dishes, but I have not called upon her to wash the dishes yet. So she has not had to invoke that new functionality that I have given her. So at this point, what I want to do is come down here to main and call upon it. So let's start out by throwing some comments in here and say that we're going to call the print info function. So how do we call a function? And boy, it's really difficult. I'm being sarcastic, by the way. Print info, open, close, curly brace, end of story. That's it. That's going to make a call to this function up here. So what happens? Under these conditions right here, basically your level launches. All this information gets parsed. Then we begin execution of main. We come through. This line here is ignored. Hits this line. It is a call to another function. We remember that this is where we need to return back to. Then this gets executed. So now you can kind of think of it as we're now up here. That gets ignored. We're going to print this out. We're going to print this out. We're going to print this out. And that's it. We're now at the end of the function. Well, when we're at the end of the function, we're finished with this. We now need to return back to the caller. So we'll return back to this line. Is there anything else on this line that needs to be done? No, that was really it. And we will continue on from there. So let's go ahead and save this. By adding in this function call now, we should see this stuff print out inside our console. So let's go ahead and jump back over here into Doom and relaunch our map. So far, Logan, everything makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, really, you're just taking what was a bunch of almost seemingly random steps and throwing them into a function that has a clear name and allows you to basically divide up your functionality and call on it more easily.
Okay, it makes your script a lot more modular as well. So let's go ahead and bring down our console and take a look. There's Hello World. So it worked. And look at the mover. The mover's gone. It's done disappeared, which is exactly what we wanted to happen because we made a call to this guy. It did all of this. Once it got done, it returned back and continued with everything required to make our mover move. So now what I want to do is go ahead and create another function. So we'll call this one move lift. Actually, I'm going to define it like this: move lift. And open curly brace, close curly brace, come down here, grab all of this good stuff, all the way down to there, cut that out, jump back up here, paste that in there, come all the way back down here, and now once we call print info, next thing I want to do is call move lift, like such. There. Now you'll notice that main is really starting to look a lot cleaner. As a matter of fact, I can come in here now and say, call the move lift function, and this moves the lift. And we can come up here and say print out information to console. I don't know, something like that. So main's looking a lot cleaner. We now have two completely different functions that are in charge of handling different tasks. One is in charge of moving the lift about. The other one is in charge of sending information out. So let's go ahead and save this and let's make sure everything works fine. So we'll come back over here and relaunch our map. So it comes in. As long as everything was typed right, there will be no crushing, and so that looks good. Look at that. Our mover's moving. Let's bring this down. What do we have here? Hello World. It's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead now, jump back over here, and take a look at what's happening. So the entire thing gets parsed into memory. Then we come down here and begin execution with main. So ignores, makes a call to print info. It remembers where we were at, comes up here, executes these lines. When we're done, it then returns back. Now it comes down, ignores this line, remembers where we're at because we're now making a function call, so it jumps up here, executes all of these lines. Once we're done, it then returns back to here. Is there anything else? Well, if there was, we could go ahead and copy this right here and paste it down here. So if we were to return back to that line, then we're just going to move on and print stuff out again. So check it out. Now I'm getting into using functions over and over again. I mean, with my daughter, when I taught her how to wash dishes, the idea was for her to do it more than once in her lifetime. And I take advantage of that just about every day. So by having functions, you can call them over and over, and that just saves you from having to reinvent the wheel in your script. So with this in place now, let's go ahead and save it. Jump back over here and execute again and see what happens.
Now, once that loads, bring the log down right away so you can wait. So we have the one hello world. Now if we wait for the mover to finish.
As soon as it finishes, boom.
So you see that the script execution was actually held up at that function until it was done.
You got it. Okay, and that was a very good thing to point out too, Logan. I'm glad you said to do that. So it printed it out. It began moving. We didn't see anything print because this had to finish off. Once that did finish, then the final printing began again. So, if we wait 2 seconds, we say move back here. Watch this. This should be interesting. What if we do that right there? So
we should basically replay the sequence.
That's going to replay the sequence, but it's going to start moving from the far side. It's going to move diagonally back up over to what we would call key 2. And then progress across. Though one thing I may want to do here is go ahead and establish a time. Well, actually, I don't have to because the last time that was established was 1 second, so it will remember that. So let's go ahead and save this and
It'll
see
just be really fast when it returns.
Yeah, it's just going to be a very, very fast return. So let's see if this will what this is going to look like. This should be interesting. Except I will back away for this one. So backing away. So there it goes over and down, and here comes our printout. And there it goes. Back, and going back again. So again, reusing functions. Okay? So let's jump back over here.
And you'll notice it did one other thing interesting. As the mover was getting over, right before it started to go down, we hit our print. But notice why it did that. We don't have a sys.waitFor at the very end of move lift. So that means that the lift can still be moving out on its own.
Exactly.
But we've already jumped back into main and continued on with that print.
So a good way to clean that up would just be simply to come in here and go ahead and grab this.
And do a sys.waitFor and make sure that move lift waits till the mover is
Once
in
it
charge
reaches
of
its spot,
it's
then
completely
it
done
returns.
moving before going back. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we saw two things basically happen at the same time,
right.
At least appear that way. And really, that's it, guys. That's it for functions in regards to simple function use, defining a function and calling on it to do something. Now, we're going to get a little bit more involved a little bit later on when we start talking about return types for a function and we start talking about the argument list. But again, we need to have a good understanding of variables first. With this, though, I think you guys are now armed with enough information to go in and start creating your scripts that are broken up into little functional modules, if you will. Just remember, always keep main last if main exists in your script. And with that, that's going to wrap up this lesson.